which then becomes a cooking technique that is adopted by enslaved Africans in the American South because they get the worst cuts of meat, things that have to be slow cooked to break down the connective tissue. And one of the things that I love is, a lot of the foods that we think of today as luxury foods were poor people food. Historically, lobsters, oysters, barbecue, this was all poor people food historically. In fact, lobsters were fed to prisoners and indentured servants and used in great number to fertilize fields. Today, lobster meat's like $50 a pound, but historically fed to indentured servants. So the most famous pirate from this era, the Buccaneers, is Captain Morgan, and these are mainly English and French pirates, and they attack mainly the shipping of Spain. The next wave of piracy is when pirates move into the Indian Ocean around the 1690s, and they have a major base of operations on the island of Madagascar, which sits off of the west coast of Africa. William Kidd is perhaps the most famous of this band of pirates. And then finally, we get this era of piracy that all of us are probably the most familiar with. Really brief period, 1716 to 1726 to finish out the Golden Age. This is where you have famous pirates like Blackbeard, Calico Jack Rackham, the famous female pirates Anne Bonny and Mary Read are from this period. All of kind of, the famous pirates that we know about, for the most part, are from just this little 10-year period of history. And then that's it. Piracy is on the wane after that. So Golden Age of piracy only lasts 100 years. The most famous era that we're mostly aware of is that last 10 years there. And of course, what do we think of when we think of pirates, right? We think of Pirates of the Caribbean, we think of Walking the Plank, we think of Tropical Blue Waters, but there were pirates right here in New England, and a lot of people are unaware of that, and that's what I'm here to share with you this evening. So pirate crews formed in one of two ways: mutiny aboard a merchant vessel, or the splitting of an existing crew due to too many crew members or a disagreement. And I'll give you an example of that. There was this famous pirate, and he only wanted to attack shipping that was not British. He was a British guy. And some of the other crew were like, well, that's crazy. We're pirates. We don't care if they're British or not. We want to attack anybody. And so half of the crew went off. They formed a new crew. He went, Hornigold, that's right, Benjamin Hornigold, went off with some of the other crew members, and that's how pirate crews were formed. They would split into different factions. Now, people who sailed with Ben Hornigold are all of the famous pirates, and so they were almost like a family. They were all related to each other. They had all sailed with each other at one point in time, including Edward Teach, Calico Jack Rackham, and Black Sam Bellamy, who you'll hear a little bit more about in just a little bit. So when a new crew formed, the first thing they would do is they would draft the ship's articles. These were the rules under which they all agreed to live, right? And so each man would sign the articles. Of course, many of them could not sign their own name, so they would just make an X. And then they would elect their leaders, and their leaders only served at the will of the crew. So think about this. This is in the 1600s. These guys are electing their leaders, right? Democratic principles. And so the captain was elected, and he only had power during the chase, if they were being chased or if they were chasing someone else. Other than that, the captain had no power. He had no special privileges. He got no special food. He had no special cabin. He was just a regular guy. He only had power when they were chasing or being chased. And if he did stuff the crew didn't like, they would vote him out of power, and they would elect a new captain. So a crew's articles would include, for example, how long the crew would stay together. They would say, we're not going to break up the band until everybody's made, 50 pieces of 8, something like that. Shares of the prize to be divided. A share is an ancient system in which sailors receive a certain amount of profit from a given voyage. And this share system is still in use in parts of the world today. Has anybody ever seen that show, Deadliest Catch, about the crab fishing in Alaska? Those guys still make shares of the catch, right? It's to incentivize you to work hard. You get a certain percentage of the catch. This goes back to the Roman times, shares. But this is what pirates did. They would each get a share of the booty, however much that they would take, right? And everybody got one share, except for a couple specialized positions. Usually the captain would maybe get a share and a half. The quartermaster was the guy who was the kind of voice between the captain and the crew, and the guy who kept track of all of the booty that they had gotten, and who would distribute that once they had ended their voyage. He would often get a share and a half. The carpenter, also a share and a half. Specialized skills there. They had, listen to this, a form of early social security in which an injured pirate would be taken care of. Hence, the articles would stipulate that you would get so many pieces of 8 if you lost your right arm, and you would get slightly less for your left arm. If you're left-handed, apparently it didn't matter. Also, interestingly, slightly more for the right leg than the left leg. I'm not sure what the rationale was behind that. But this early form of Social Security that would ensure that injured pirates would be taken care of. So you can see that these guys are very ahead of their time. Democratic principles, Social Security. Some of the pirates did not allow gambling or drinking on board in an effort to curb fighting, although most did allow for such things. Conflict between 2 individuals to be settled by pistol and sword on shore. Okay, so no fighting on the boat. You got a beef. You take it on shore. And what they would do is you got 1 shot, because of course the guns only fired 1 shot back then. And if you missed, if both guys missed, then you went to swords. And it wasn't to the death. It was until somebody was grievously injured. And that's how they would determine these things. And then finally, all major decisions were to be made by vote of the whole company of the crew. Hey, where do you guys want to go a-pirating? Should we go off the coast of Puerto Rico, or should we head to Haiti? How about that French ship off in the distance? Should we pursue her, or should we look for something else? All major decisions made by votes. So, in the early colonial period, right here in Maine, Wabanaki freedom fighters were labeled as pirates. Ooh, I forgot to mention, I taught a semester-length class on global piracy at the Maine College of Art and Design, a couple semesters in a row. Turns out 20-year-old art school students think pirates are really cool. Not surprising, right? Anyways, what we found out in the course of this class, a 16-week class, was that this term pirate is malleable, right? And that people in power would use it to debase or delegitimize people not in power. And that's exactly what's happening here with the Wabanaki. In fact, I've been reading this great book, Storm of the Sea, Indians and Empire in the Atlantic Age of Sail, and the whole kind of topic of this book is that the Wabanaki would take European vessels and use them against the Europeans, right? And you guys probably know, the Wabanaki were very proficient mariners before Europeans arrived. And so then when Europeans arrived, they start taking shallops, which are these one-masted, smallish vessels with not too complicated rigging, and they start using them against the English. And they're using them against the English to great effect. A term of convenience, the word piracy, already loaded with economic and political implications from beyond the coast of New England. Pirates, once again, between 1650 and 1750, referred to the golden age of piracy. This geographic cultural shift of this term into the Anglo-Wabanaki context coincides with the broader British effort to delegitimize indigenous resistance to colonial expansion. And what that means is, so you had these Wabanaki using British ships against the British and